Seance will have you raising the dead in no time. Directed by Gary Fletter, written by Harry Anderson, and shot by Rick Boda. Based on a story from the Vault of Horror number 25, drawn by Johnny Craig. This episode takes a 2-bit scam from the book and classes it up. We enter this tale in mid-seance. A spirit comes forward, but it's only Benjamin. He and Allison are practicing their latest con. Allison has had it with Ben's fumbles. Once this last score is finished, they are going their separate ways. Ben feels uneasy about this final scam, but they hear Dorothy Chalmers come into the building, looking for Madame Leona. Ben hides, and Allison adopts a fake accent to welcome the missus. A remorseful Benjamin thinks back to how this all began. A week earlier, the two met with Mr. Chalmers. They feed him a story about his dead uncle being a bank robber, passing off Allison as a long-lost cousin, and presenting proof of a phony investment account holding a little less than $3 million.
As far as I can tell, as long as we can keep the authorities out of this, the two of you could probably claim the money without any trouble. All you'd need would be the account number.
Which you have.
And what exactly do you want, Mr. Pulaski, for your trouble?
Nothing. The probate gives me 10% from the sale of the investments. I don't want any more than that.
Ben leaves the two alone in the room to talk it over. Chalmers has his doubts, but arranges a meeting with Allison to talk things over further. The comic is more straightforward and looser on the specifics. Mr. Chalmers hands over a check for $20,000 to Ben and George. Chalmers casually mentions the distrust that Madame Gilda conveyed to him over this deal. Madame Gilda is his wife's medium. She swears by her, but he remains unconvinced of her abilities. The deal is done, and once Chalmers is out of sight, the two men have a good laugh. Their scam worked, and with a bit of luck, they will take Chalmers for all he is worth. Of course, Allison and Ben are up to something. Ben hides in the closet as Allison gets ready for Mr. Chalmers. The two get to know each other as they talk about the validity of the day's offer. Discussion soon becomes seduction, and Ben is watching, ready with the camera. The next day, Chalmers and Allison show up to buy out Ben from the deal. As Ben gets the paperwork, he mistakenly sings the song Chalmers and Allison were dancing to last night. Their cover is blown. Chalmers knows they're scamming him. Ben breaks out the Blackmail portfolio, photos of Chalmers with Allison. Chalmers is confident his wife will never see the pictures and walks out. Allison follows him to the elevator.
Wouldn't do that if I were you, Prescott.
Please, Miss Peters. You're capable of many things, but I doubt murder is one of them. Ow!
Chalmers is still, by some miracle, alive, until fate drops in on him.
We were close, Benny. We were really close on this one.
Oh, no.
After months of draining Chalmers' money, Ben and George have themselves a little celebration before checking if the coast is clear. Chalmers hears everything, that there is no actual business that his money is going into. He leaves and is going to have his lawyer see to it that these swindlers will spend the rest of their lives in prison. The con men give chase. They have to kill Chalmers. The two run Chalmers off the side of the road, killing him. Ben and Allison give their statement at the police station, where they meet Mrs. Chalmers. It is revealed the missus is blind when Ben gives back her late husband's cane. Mrs. Chalmers intends to stay true to her husband's earthly matters, including Ben and Allison's ploy, but she needs her husband's approval first. She made an appointment with Madame Leona. Mere days after the funeral, Ben and George pay a visit to Mrs. Chalmers. She's heard about their business with her husband and thinks it's time to withdraw his investments, as she's afraid of losing the money. The two assure her there is nothing to worry about. She doesn't know about this. She'll have to ask her husband what he thinks. A visit to Madame Gilda is inevitable. Mrs. Chalmers will have her answer in a few days. Ben and George track down Madame Gilda to her home and bribe her to persuade the missus to keep doing business with them. Their plan is simple. George will hide during the seance and then reappear wearing ghostly makeup, pretending to be the late Mr. Chalmers. Madame Gilda agrees. Allison and Ben are more severe with their methods. Allison has the madam tied up and copies her voice. The next day, Mrs. Chalmers, Ben, and George sit at Madame Gilda's table. The lights dim as the seance begins. As Madame Gilda tries to summon Mr. Chalmers, George sneaks away from the table. Minutes pass. Madame Gilda is in a trance, and Ben wonders what's taking George so long. He finally sees his partner appear, posing as the ghost. He approaches the table, remaining silent. Mrs. Chalmers asks if she should keep investing with these two men. George remains silent, and Ben thinks he's overdoing the whole ghost thing. The ghost begins to choke Ben. Mrs. Chalmers screams through all the commotion. Madame Gilda yells to stop. This was not part of the agreed-upon plan. Allison's phony seance is in full swing, and the spirit of Mr. Chalmers is called upon.
In the expression of the sacred powers, where do I invoke your spirit?
What is it, Git?
It looks like Mr. Chalmers, Mum.
Ben is dead. Madame Gilda tells Mrs. Chalmers about the entire plan to swindle her. They will not let George get away with murder. The doors are locked, and there's no way out. They open the curtains to his hiding spot. George's dead body lies there. He's been strangled to death too, a look of terror frozen on his face. Madame Gilda and Mrs. Chalmers are baffled as to who or what could have killed the two men. The show's Chalmers doesn't even try to hide the fact that he's back from the grave. He sees to a more heart-ripping finale in this adaptation.
Oh, Jesus Christ, in a cardigan sweater.
Seance is a simple tale. It's very easy to see where the twist will come in as the story progresses. I did have fun reading the original story, but I can't speak for how much it really has to offer to modern audiences. Ben and George barely qualify as their own distinct characters. Changing the con artists over to a male-female partnership and adding professional tension between the two gives the story some additional conflict to invest in outside of the straightforward ghost story. The costumes and lighting, reminiscent of film noir, make this one of the moodier half hours. It's episodes like this that make me wish an official HD remaster of the series was on its way. But no matter the video quality or the script's simplicity, Kathy Moriarty's performance makes every moment a joy to experience. Nobody plays jaded quite like her.
Nurse, I cut my elbow.
That looks terrible.
Next.
Please, don't leave me here.
Oh, jeez.